Hi, BookTube. Thanks for joining me. I have a couple books to talk about. I wanted to update you on my reading, especially wanted to talk about this one that I finished, Transit, the second book in the trilogy, the Rachel Cusk trilogy that I find myself in, even though I didn't think I was going to read this one so soon, but I got it for free at a bookstore because I had taken books back and gotten some credit, or taken books there and gotten credit. I don't know when I'm going to read Kudos, but if anyone has read this far into the trilogy and is interested in reading Kudos with me, let me know, and then we can have a chat of some kind about it, because this one, I have to say, I read it. I let it simmer. Then I read it, like I skimmed it again to get a better, like a second sense of the flow. It's constructed, it uses the same form as the first book, except that it doesn't have these numbered sections like chapters. They're just chapters. It's moving the story along about the unnamed narrator, except she is named once in the first book, and her name is used again once in this book, which is interesting. I'll try not to say her name, because reading that, coming upon that, is really fun. The main character is splitting from her husband in the first book. She's got two young boys. We know she's a writer and that she teaches writing. And she's moving. We know she has to move out of her home, her family home. And here she is coming back to London in the city. She's finding a flat. She's found a second floor flat in a neighborhood that she can afford. The first scene, so these are vignettes where, once again, in this form that Rachel Cusk is using, the narrator is, we are seeing through the eyes of the narrator, and we are only told in first person what she is saying to someone. So in the first scene, there is her interaction with a real estate agent. And the real estate agent, what they're saying is sometimes in quotes. This is true of any person she's interacting with. But what she's saying is just said to you. In other words, she would say, Gerard said this. I said, do you really think that's true? That kind of form. So it's the real estate agent, then it's her bumping into a former partner. I can't remember how many years they were together. This is Gerard. And just like the other book, her interactions and her telling us about those interactions, we get little snippets of who she is, bounced off of the person or persons she's interacting with, or something that's happening to her. But she does not come as a typical character. And this is intentional, according to Rachel Cusk. And so you're watching ever so carefully into those interactions with other people, because in those reactions, if you're doing this close reading, you can understand a little bit about at least where she's at in life. In some of these interactions, she's sharing past experiences. So we get to hear a little bit about different parts of her life through her sharing it with other people. I have a lot of tabs in this book. I mean, this one was interesting. I think the other one has a lighter touch, so I think it's an easier read. This one is a little more juicy. It's longer sections in some parts. There's a section where she goes to a conference where she's being asked to speak, and she's with two other writers. And that section with the two other writers, Julian and Lewis, is long. But if you spend a little time there, the things that she's reflecting about Julian and Lewis, there's a lot to be mined, and it's pretty extraordinary what she does in these longer sections. The overarching theme is her moving into this second floor flat where she's got some people living under her who are really mean to her and are talking about her as evil to her face, but also to neighbors and also to the workers that she has in her flat doing some renovations. I thought this was a really interesting part. It weaves in and out of the other sections of the book because this is an ongoing renovation. And I thought this was interesting because I don't know if you've ever had a situation in life where someone just has decided they just don't like you. And let's just assume there's no real reason for them to have decided early that this is how they feel about you. But this is what they bring to their interactions with you, whether this is at the workplace or it's a neighbor, whatever it is. How devastating that could be to a certain kind of person. I know it would be devastating to me. I have had a situation like this where someone has made decisions about me without knowing me, and it is devastating to me to think that someone can have vitriol, but in the end, you can't do anything about it. If there is something you can do about it, great. But if it's a situation where someone's just decided to feel that way, no matter how much you think you can put it out of your mind, you think c'est la vie, that sort of thing, it is a weight on you that someone has decided to have that much energy around, negative energy around your presence. This is a good platform for Cusk to have the narrator say some things about how she feels in and around this situation with the neighbor. One of the themes of this book, I feel, is her thinking about and sharing thoughts about fate versus things that happen to us in life being through a set of decisions, but not necessarily our decisions. There's something in someone's power that has made your circumstances occur. And it's usually some kind of energy, whether it's good energy or bad energy, and how you've reacted to that energy can put other things in motion. And this is really interesting part of this particular book because it comes up in a couple places because of the interaction with the neighbors. So I'll get back to that, and also just the discussion of evil. One of the scenes that I wanted to draw out is the scene with when she's at the conference and with these two writers, and the writer Julian and Lewis. Lewis tells the story. I don't know whether this is during his talk or later, but he tells a story of watching his cat Mino trap a bird outside, and what happens in this scene. And the way that he uses this scene of the cat trapping the bird and the bird trying to get away, and whether that happens or not, how he uses that as a metaphor in his own life, how in his life he's been both the cat and the bird. But there's a lot of nuance put on that scene, and that writing I just felt was absolutely beautiful. And then there's another scene or another part of the book where a younger than the narrator, a writer that's younger than the narrator comes to visit her at her apartment, and she might be looking for some help with her writing and trying to get it. She's got an idea of writing about a painter. This is a painter that the narrator is familiar with, and the narrator, goes into a reflection about how she's connected with one of this painter's works in a museum, and how she came upon it, and she just felt something. She was immediately drawn in. This painting is me. I have this section here. It says, "It was perfectly possible to become the prisoner of an artist's vision. Like love," I said, "being understood creates the fear that you will never be understood again. But there have been other paintings," I said, "before and since, that have moved me just as deeply." The fact that what we're seeing in this book is some viewpoints that she has now I'm assuming that she's gone through this breakup of her marriage and maybe also bringing in the outcomes of other relationships. So you can see that she may be seeing things right now through the lens of her breakup. That's a just really beautiful section in general. She meets with a friend. This is another vignette in this book. And during that coffee that they're having together, she says, "I said a lot of people spend their lives trying to make things last as a way of avoiding asking themselves whether those things were what they really wanted." So think about that in the context of a relationship. A lot of people spend their lives trying to make things last. So thinking of it in the context of a relationship or a job, as a way of avoiding asking themselves whether those things were what they really wanted. That is so profound, true at times in our lives. And to me, this could only be spoken by somebody who's just going through a breakup of a relationship that seemingly she didn't want to see break up, but then it did. And you'll see what I mean when you read the first part of the book and she's reflecting on how that occurred, how the breakup actually occurred, and how this is where passivity or action comes into play again. These themes of fate. And then lastly, speaking of the neighbors, she says she's speaking to one of the contractors. "For a long time," I said, "I believed that it was only through absolute passivity that you could learn to see what was really there. But my decision to create a disturbance by renovating my house had awoken a different reality, as though I had disturbed a beast sleeping in its lair. I had started to become, in effect, angry. I had started to desire power. Because what I now realized was that other people had had it all along, that what I called fate was merely the reverberation of their will, a tale scripted not by some universal storyteller, but by people who would elude justice for as long as their actions were met with resignation rather than outrage." That's one way of looking at life. I wouldn't say it's the only way, but man, it gives us some insight into her mindset, where she's at right now. I really liked this book. It is complex, it's nuanced. I don't know that I've completely absorbed it. I would love to hear what you think about this book in general, how it differs from the first one, and what you got out of some of the themes. I'm really glad that I got to this. I wasn't expecting it to be so, and that I would also be just like looking through it again a second time, but I'm glad that I did. So I will be back to give you the rest of the reading update. I just wanted to focus on this one first and get my thoughts out. I'll see you in the next clip. Hi again. I really didn't expect to be coming to you from the library this weekend, but here I am. I'm at the library because it's a rainy, kind of yucky day, and we took the opportunity and went to the climbing gym because I certainly couldn't do any yard work. So I'm running here, taking advantage of not being able to, what's it called? Rake. Rake leaves. So I hope it's not too loud with the raindrops coming down on my car. They're large. I can hear that large drop sound. Anyway, before I return these books, I want to tell you about them because I've read some interesting books. So the last library bag of books I had, it had so many things in it. The Fawn by Magda Szabo, an NYRB book club pick. But I just felt like I don't know. I just got immediately slumpy. Nothing was catching my attention. I started the Ron Rash. So I don't know how many of these books I had the last time I checked in because I've gone to the library since. So let's just get into it. So I picked up because I was feeling in a slumpy mood, I went to the other branch of the library that it's not too far from where I live, because sometimes the way that books are set up there, I can have a book catch my attention in a way that it doesn't do in this library. Just the way that things are set up, and especially nonfiction. So that's how I found this one. This book called The Leaving Season by Kelly McMasters, a memoir in essays. And this just sounded, her name sounded familiar to me. She's the author of Welcome to Shirley, an Orion Book Award finalist. And she's co-editor of the anthologies Wanting, Women Writing About Desire. She's a former bookshop owner. So this is one of the things that drew me to this book. She teaches at Hofstra University and lives in New York. The thing that I liked about this was this is one of those things that can sometimes get me out of a slump. It just had this rhythmic cadence to her life about it. The story starts in New York City. She is there really close to the World Trade Centers during September 11th. And then it goes to her meeting her artist husband, and they eventually move to a place in Pennsylvania that I'm familiar with, and in a farmhouse, and he's got a studio and a barn, and they have children eventually. And she opens a bookshop in the town of Honesdale, PA, which is like central Pennsylvania near Scranton. And then other things in her life happen. She struggles with the bookshop. Her marriage has difficulties, and on and on and on. But it had this rhythm that worked for me. And I don't know, it pulled me. And I was really delighted to be reading something that just was easy, and it pulled me along. So that's what this book did for me, and that's the mood if you're needing something like this, The Leaving Season. Then I had picked up, I think in that other book haul, Little Rabbit, which I actually saw on the Virago Press site, because they have also published this book, except it has a different cover. Little Rabbit by Alyssa Song Siradej. And she is an author who's done some fiction, smaller pieces, not a book. She was supported by Yaddo and lives in Philadelphia. I read this like a week and a half ago, and the details are fading now. So let me just open the flap to remind myself. When our young narrator first meets the choreographer at an artist residency in Maine, it's not a match. That's right. So she meets a guy. She's like 30. He's in his 50s. This book tends to, unfortunately, classify people in their 50s as being really old. Kind of. Like, it makes a big deal about him being 50 and her 30, which I get. There's a big difference in life experience between being 31 and 50. And you can be much older than you are when you're in your 50s, depending on your mind. So I don't know. But they meet again under different circumstances. She didn't really like him at that residency. And they start seeing each other. Except it gets a little lopsided. And that's all I'm going to say. It's a very sexy book. I felt like those scenes weren't... I felt like they were written well. I will say, here comes a spoiler, kind of, but I do want to say it's a trigger warning. So if you don't want to hear it, just skip ahead a couple seconds, I guess. But there is consensual violence that goes on in this book. The sex scenes get more violent, but it's consensual. So interesting thing to put in this book. But it is the catalyst for her to be talking to, very carefully, eventually, to her friends and roommate who are already questioning why she's in this relationship. Really because of his age, and also I think because of the vibe he gives off, and that he's got this place in Western Mass. And I can't remember where she is. Maybe it's New York City, but in any case, it's a drive. So they're questioning those things. So it's hard for her to bring up this other thing. And she wonders why she is engaging in this. But she is. And she feels the more she engages in it, the more that that it's all right. And she's definitely consenting. So yeah, it's interesting. I like this debut novel. I think it's very clever. I'm not revealing things that go on and the actual how the plot turns out, but I remember I was turning pages and I read large chunks of this book because I needed to know what was going on. So this was like another thing that pulled me out of a slump. It did. So, and I will say that I remember when I first started this book, the cliches were heavy. Not the cliches, like the metaphors is what I mean. I was like, oh, I don't know. But I kept going. I was fine after a while with the metaphors, I guess. Poetry. So what I learned from this book is that I love Mary Oliver, as I knew I did, and I love her. It just solidified because there's Mary Oliver in here, and Rilke. And I learned that the poem called If by Rudyard Kipling is UK's favorite poem by pretty much any metric. It wins every poll, and what's more, a couplet from the poem is inscribed above the player's entrance to Wimbledon's Centre Court. And I really like the poem a lot. I finished the Rosemary Tonks. The halt during the chase. What does that title mean? I wondered about that. So Rosemary Tonks is interesting. She wrote a few books in the 70s at least. I don't know if there were ones before that, 60s and 70s. I've read The Bloater. That was republished by the wonderful New Directions Publishing. And then this one just came out as a republished book with this beautiful cover. And I don't know why there's a balloon there. I started reading this, and it starts off as like you're introduced to Sophia and her just quirky family. She's quirky. I loved it. The mother and daughter kind of have a codependent relationship a little bit, and there's a neighbor of her mother's named Rudy, and Rudy has been married twice, and he's got kids from both marriages, and so Sophia is friends with some of these grown boys, men. 31. They're either her age and younger, Philip and Guy. And she's been in love with Philip forever, since they were kids. And this is the guy that she wants to marry. She's 31. So in this day and time, this is in the early 70s, like her mother wants her to get married and she wants to move out. And I don't recall what she does for a living. I just got so wrapped up in the goofiness of it all. I sometimes got confused who people were, but that was fine. I didn't care. I had fun. I think Rosemary has a way of sneaking in like real literary good writing in this writing that in the story that feels goofy. The main thing about the story is, will Philip ever marry Sophia? And the halt before the chase, I think, references just a change of mind that Sophia has during this book. And her wanting to explore, just getting to the point where she decides she's going to explore more in life than just chasing after a husband. She's just going to explore herself. And maybe it means that she ends up living by herself. So I think that's the gist of the story. But there's one, so she's at some point later in the book staying at a French large house with children as a guest of some kind. I don't know what the relationship is, but I think she goes to the south of France, and it's freezing when she's there. It's absolutely freezing. And there's like 5 kids and a dog, and there's somebody who takes after the kids and the parents or whatever.
And so she says, the last thing I remember before going to sleep was that my feet were so cold and so far away that unless I slept in a circle, bringing my knees up to my chin, I would never, never thaw them out. And then she finally falls asleep. And then the next paragraph says, there were 5 cherubs and a dog posted around my bed like silent sentries. They looked into my face as though it was the much-desired toy of childhood, and I looked at them and could not remember a time when waking up had not been a beatific moment. I stretched out my arms to them. They crowded with joy, held me with their cucumber-cold hands, and made romping movements along the edge of the bed. A wee, that's the dog, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, A-I-O-U, I-O, a wee made corresponding noises and gestures, slightly ridiculous in a Cocker Spaniel. Their voices came out of tiny white teeth and were as high and clear as bells. When they had examined my nightdress, run their fingers along the edges of my books, gently lifted up and down my jar of cold cream, all at the highest pitch of excitement, they seemed suddenly to sense a voice calling them from outside, because they said goodbye all at once and ran away, exhilarated by what they had seen. And so I ate my first breakfast in Normandy, lifting freezing fingers out of my bed and biting into every fragment of toast and spoonful of egg as though I had never eaten such godlike food before. I can taste it now, that first simple breakfast of brown toast, and I can feel the hot dome of the solid brown egg sitting in the silver cup. I mean, isn't that fantastic writing? And then she's walking around the grounds of the house, and Philip is supposed to visit her in this place, and you know, Philip, the guy that doesn't seem to want to marry her. But so she's walking around and she's missing Philip because they haven't seen each other for a while. They came to like an impasse and he's going to be visiting her. It came over me with absolute total force. I want him and he's waiting for me and loves me. I want that milky brow with the cross lines on it, lightly corrugated, the brow that I have sipped and eaten and have never tried to understand. And that absurd hair that grows like scrub, gorse bushes, heather all over, around and down the back of the head. It's mine, and I want it. To be joined instantly to that smooth body is more important than France, England, mysticism, self-respect, the future. It's imperative, and I can't stand here fighting it a minute longer. Oh, I had no idea I was so in love with him. I demand that body with its nervous power, its smell, its intensity, and it must be given to me. If not, I'll... In 2 minutes, it was over. I recovered. It was the last struggle, I thought. Thank God that's finished, and walked away. I don't know whether I would say read The Bloater first. I don't think so. I think just dive right into this goofy but really well-written book. Rosemary Tonks, she has an interesting life. If you're at all interested, look that up. That's it. That's all I got. Thanks for joining me again. I hope the raindrops aren't too loud on this video. Please let me know what you're up to, what you're reading, of course what your thoughts are on Transit. If you are due to read Kudos, I don't know when I'm going to read it, but I could be influenced by others to read it soon. Yeah, let me know about any of the other books that I mentioned here. You know how much I love your comments and how they start wonderful discussions. Thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next one.